The time is 11:56 a.m. We're on the record. This is the deposition of the 30B6 witness, Lauri Dannemiller, for the case of Friends of Denver Parks, Inc. et al. Versus City and County of Denver et al. Case number 2013-CV032444, and the District Court, City and County of Denver, Colorado. Today is March 18th, 2014. We are located at 1660 South Albion Street, Suite 1100, Denver, Colorado. The court reporter is Deanna Basinger. The videographer is J.R. Wren, CLVS. The attorneys will identify themselves, beginning with their attorney on my left and the deponent's right.
My name's John Case. I represent the plaintiffs. With me is Christopher Franceschi.
David Broadwell, representing the City and County of Denver.
Jerome D. Herrera, representing Denver Public Schools.
Let me ask you to raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of law?
Morning, Ms. Dannemiller.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Could you please, for the record, tell us your full name
Laura J. Dannemiller,
and your date of birth, please?
8/17/61.
What is your residence address?
4400 West 46th Avenue, number 101, Denver, Colorado 80212.
Do you work for the City of Denver?
Yes, I do.
How long have you been a city employee?
Since May 2005.
What's your current title?
Executive Director of Denver Parks and Recreation.
And what previous titles have you had?
With the City and County of Denver?
Yes.
Executive Director of Denver City Council. That's the only other position I've held.
When were you Executive Director of the City Council?
May 2005 through November 2011.
And in November of 2011, you assumed your current duties?
Yes.
Could you tell us your employment prior to going to work for the City of Denver, please?
My most immediate employment was with the City of Inglewood. I was the Community Development Director, which is basically a manager within the planning department that managed economic development, land use, long-range planning. Prior to that, I was the town manager for the town of Poncha Springs, Colorado. Prior to that, I was a recreation and planning manager in the city of Lakewood, Colorado. And prior to that, I was a recreation program coordinator with Washington University in St. Louis.
Tell us about your educational background, please.
I have an undergraduate degree in education with an emphasis in sports administration. I have a master's degree in Parks and Recreation Administration, and I have a master's degree in public administration.
Where'd you get your undergraduate degree?
Bowling Green State University,
Huh? Did you grow up in Ohio?
mostly.
And how about your master's in Parks Admin?
Eastern Kentucky University, and my MPA is from University of Colorado at Denver.
Do you have any professional licenses?
No.
And are you a political appointee or a career service employee of the City and County of Denver?
Political appointee.
So you serve at the pleasure of the mayor?
I do.
And he has the right to terminate you for any reason or no reason. True?
True.
What is the purpose of Denver Parks?
In the department in general, or Denver Parks?
No, parks. Why do we have parks in Denver?
Why do we have parks in Denver? Parks are for the general enjoyment of the public in the natural environment.
Why is that important?
In my opinion, it's important because to make an individual healthy and whole, part of that is recreation and recreating in the outdoor environment. It contributes to the general health and welfare of the public. It contributes to the general environmental conditions of the city, so that if there's natural areas, it performs a certain environmental task. It cleanses air. It provides green space for respite. I think that's probably the extent of it.
What's your definition of parkland?
My definition is publicly owned land that is owned, operated, maintained, and managed for the general welfare and recreational purposes of the public.
What is the purpose of natural areas?
Within,
I'm going to object to any questions about natural areas as being irrelevant to the legal issues in this case, and that's a standing objection, but go ahead and answer.
my definition or the definition that is in the ordinance?
Whichever one you want to use.
Well, I'd like to answer what your question is.
Well, I was asking about your definition of natural areas.
Okay,
I can read what the ordinance says.
Sure, my definition would be similar to, I think, the ordinance. It's an area that either is or has the potential to be or will be restored into a natural condition, meaning, it was in the condition prior to any, changes or amendments to that land. It has unique either vegetative or vegetative qualities or habitat on the parcel itself. It provides an opportunity for potential learning, opportunities for learning about the natural habitat. It also potentially provides area where the public can observe species that they don't naturally have a chance to see in their natural condition.
And what's the purpose of natural areas in Denver?
Those things that I just described.
Why is that good for people?
Because I think, there's a variety of experiences that people, choose, and some of them are urban park experiences where there's more amenities provided, and then there's also a percentage of the population that prefers to have a more unique experience where the landscape is more in its natural habitat.
Is there some kind of relationship between acreage that's set aside for parks and the population of a city?
There's the relationship, or is there? I'm not sure what your question means. What you mean in terms of a relationship?
Well, I mean, do you try to have a certain amount of park acreage set aside for every 1,000 people?
Sure. There's a nationally accepted standard, which is 10 acres per 1,000 people.
Now, I understand that Denver is, in numbers, is above that, right? We have more than 10 acres per 1,000 people.
I think right now, in terms of urban acreage, we're very close to the 10 per 1,000. But if you were to add in our mountain parks acreage, you were to get us, I think we would get somewhere in the neighborhood of 33 acres per 1,000.
So would it be true then that as your population grows, you try to add more park area so that you maintain at least 10 acres for every 1,000 people?
I think that's a fairly acceptable standard.
Is that what you try to do as the manager of Parks and Recreation?
We're always trying to acquire potential lands, but in a more strategic way than just general acquisition, because we know that there are certain areas of town that have a dearth of open space, and there are certain areas that have an abundance. And so our efforts are more directed towards those areas of town that don't have that ratio per council district.
And as population grows in one part of the city or another, do you try to increase park acreage where the population is growing?
It depends on what the current acreage is.
Are you familiar with the master plan for Denver parks?
Yes, it's called a game plan.
Are you familiar with the comprehensive plan for year 2000?
I would refer to that as the game plan.
I see. So it means the same to you?
Yes.
Do you believe that city officials should tell the truth?
Of course.
Do you believe that the city owns parkland as trustee and trust for the benefit of its citizens?
Objection calls for legal conclusion.
You can answer.
I would ask an attorney what the legal responsibility of the city is.
Do you think that people place special trust in the city to protect and preserve parks?
I would assume yes.
Do you believe that the Denver Department of Parks and Recreation should protect and preserve public parks owned by the city and managed by DPR for park purposes?
That's something that's stated in the game plan, so yes, I would agree with that.
It's also stated in the zoning code, true?
I'm not familiar with that statement in the zoning code.
Let me show you exhibit number 4, paragraph 9.3.2.1. See that?
Yes.
So it's not only in the comprehensive plan, it's in the zoning code that your department should protect and preserve public parks owned by the city and managed by your department for park purposes, true?
This describes what the zone district is, not what our responsibility is.
Is it your responsibility to protect and preserve public parks that are owned by the city and that you manage for park purposes?
Yes.
Do you believe that city officials should follow the law?
Yes.
Do you believe that the people of Denver should be allowed to vote before parkland is sold?
I think the charter describes when the people are required to vote before the sale and transfer of land.
Let me ask you the question again and see if you can answer it yes or no. Do you believe that the people of Denver should be allowed to vote before parkland is sold?
If that land is designated parkland, I believe what the charter says.
Well, suppose it's just land that's been used as a park for 60 years. Should the people who use it be allowed to vote?
The charter describes when people can vote and not vote.
Well, in this case, you could have put to a public vote the issue of whether a school could be built in a park, true?
I could not have the authority to do that.
Well, you could have asked the clerk and recorder to do it, true?
No. I don't have the authority to do that.
I see. Who could have done that?
I would assume that City Council has the authority to refer measures to the ballot.
Did you ask the city council to refer this measure to the ballot?
No.
When we presented the petition signatures to the clerk and recorder, did you ask her to let the people vote?
That's not my role.
So the answer is no?
That's not my role.
Well, you didn't ask the clerk and recorder to let the people vote, true?
I don't have the authority to ask the people.
Did you ask the mayor? Why can't we let the people vote on this?
No, I did not.
Why not?
The charter describes when people vote on it or not.
But you talked to the mayor about this issue, true?
I didn't have an individual conversation with him about this issue specifically, about the land transfer specifically, individually. No,
Never.
never.
So before the Parks and Recreation Board conducted hearings in November and December of 2012. You never talked to the mayor?
I talked to mayor's staff, not the mayor directly, is what I said.
Who on his staff?
Evan Dreyer.
Tell us about the conversation between you and Evan Dreyer.
Which conversation
All of them.
specifically?
All of them involving this park.
I would say my initial conversation with the deputy chief of staff was probably sometime in July of 2012, and that was when we were having discussions, about the potential transfer of the land. I can't pinpoint a specific date. I would say there were probably 3 to 4 conversations over time with Evan Dreyer about the transaction in general, and then about the process that would take place at the Parks and Rec Advisory Board for de-designation of the natural area.
Tell us what you said and what Mr. Dreyer said about the transaction in general.
I knew at the time that there was a desire on the part of Denver Public Schools to find additional land for a elementary school, and so we had conversations about that. We had conversations about the location of that. We had conversations about the potential initially with Councilmember Lehman about that site itself, and we had conversations about the removal of the de-designation or the designated natural area, and the process that we would go through to determine whether that needed to be removed or not. The natural area designation needed to be removed or not.
Did Mr. Dreyer explain to you what the proposed transaction was going to be?
I already knew that from conversations with Mr. Steinberg.
What did he tell you?
Initially, the conversations were about the land transfer with DPS, and then later there were conversations around the third kind of entity, I guess, the Domestic Violence Center becoming a part of the transaction.
Do you know why Mr. Steinberg would be talking to you about transferring land that he said is not a park?
That's his role in the city, to manage real estate transactions. And
right. But why would, if it wasn't a park, why would he talk to you?
Because he talks to any agency that has any, I think, agency head that has, and any tangential relationship to the parcel itself. For example, he's talked to me about a parcel that is in between Spear Boulevard and Auraria campus that isn't a park, but some people think it's a park, and so we've had conversations about that.
All right. Well, in 2012 was this parcel of land, some people call it Parcel 31, some people call it Hampton Heights North Park. Was that owned by the City of Denver?
Yes.
Was it under the management of your department?
Yes.
Was it managed for park purposes?
Yes.
Now then, you mentioned when I was asking you about the vote that you rely on the charter to determine whether the people are allowed to vote. True?
I don't know that, yes, yes, I guess that's fair to say.
Okay. So when you have a question about whether something's proper or not, you look to the charter. Is that it?
Typically would go to our attorneys to ask
Right.
legal determination.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Which attorney in the city attorney's office did you talk to?
Patrick Wheeler.
Is he the attorney that's regularly assigned to the Parks Department?
Yes.
How long has he been regularly assigned to the Parks Department, if you know?
Don't know.
Now then, is there anything in the charter that says that you're responsible for helping Denver Public Schools find land to build on?
Not that I know of.
Why did you think that's your responsibility if you're managing parks?
I didn't feel like that was my responsibility. My responsibility was to respond to a request from Denver Public Schools, not to assist them.
You could have said, I'm against this. I don't want to give up this open space land in southeast Denver, which has a growing population, true?
Ultimately, my responsibility was to remove or not remove the natural area designation, not to vote or to make a decision, a legal decision about the transaction, because that's not within my authority.
I wasn't asking you about legal. I was asking you as the leader of the Parks Department. You could have said, no, I'm against this deal, right?
That question wasn't posed to me.
Did you pose it to yourself?
The question that was posed to me was the natural area designation from DPS.
And why was it necessary for you to consider de-designating Hampton Heights North Park?
Because there was a natural area designation status on that parcel 31 at the time. And if you look at the ordinance, the Denver Revised Municipal Code on natural areas, the de-designation process is similar to the designation process, and that's a managerial decision, a manager's decision.
And so if you hadn't de-designated Hampton Heights North Park as a natural area, the deal couldn't have gone through. True?
Objection calls for conclusion as to law. Go ahead.
I think that's yet to be determined.
Well, that was your understanding at the time, right?
No, my understanding was I was removing the natural area designation. I never said that was contingent on the sale of the land. Those are two different actions.
Well, you knew that the mayor's office wanted you to de-designate Hampton Heights North Park as a natural area, true?
The mayor's office never asked me to do that.
Well, they discussed doing it with you, true?
Those are two different things. Asking me to do it and discussing it were two different things.
All right.
I never got a directive from the mayor to de-designate the parcel.
Well, why would he send Mr. Dreyer to talk to you about it if he didn't want to de-designate it?
Because there was a request that came in from Denver Public Schools to do that, and I would typically escalate a situation like that to Mr. Dreyer. He was my supervisor at the time.
And you could have decided not to de-designate this land, true?
True.
Why didn't you refuse to de-designate it?
Because I looked at the criteria that was in place and made a recommendation based on that criteria, made a recommendation based on input that I received from our natural areas expert, made a observation of the property in general, and all of those criteria led me to determine that this was a parcel that was not meeting the criteria per the ordinance.
You mean it didn't meet the criteria at the time for a natural area?
Correct.
It could have been restored to a natural area condition, true?
That wasn't a question that was posed to me at the time. It was to de-designate or not whether it could have been restored.
Well, the natural area ordinance calls for the restoration of the natural environment in areas that have become fatigued or corrupted. That's the wrong term, but there's a process contemplated in the ordinance for rehabilitating damaged natural areas, true?
Yes.
You could have ordered that.
There's also a process for, it doesn't have to be restored. It could actually at the time be in a natural state, so restoration isn't required. Yes, there's a lot of ability that I have to call for restoration of that property. At the time, I did not.
And why didn't you?
Because there was, I think, a number of reasons. Number one, we didn't have it wasn't a priority parcel to be restored based on the amount of financial resources that we had. The adjacent property to it, the adjacent acreage and the adjacent designated Hensel Park were much better indicators of natural habitat, natural native plant species. And so, in my opinion, the effort that would have taken to restore this prairie dog town infested area would have not been a proper investment and a wise investment with taxpayer dollars at the time.
Well, you have other natural areas in Denver where the prairie dogs invade, right?
Fairly limited.
Okay. If they get to be too much of a nuisance, you can thin the population or remove them, true?
Yes.
And you could have done that here, true?
I think the question was whether I made a decision to do it or not. I made a decision not to because of the priority of that parcel was so low and the current vegetative state was so low. So at that time, we made a decision not to do that.
Who is we?
I.
Do you believe that city officials should follow the published rules that apply to them?
Yes.
Do you believe that city officials should be consistent in interpreting the law that applies to their actions?
I'm not following the question.
Do you believe that city officials should act consistently with stated policy?
Yes.
Is the stated policy of the Denver Department of Parks and Recreation stated in the Denver Blueprint?
Blueprint, you mean the city's overall comprehensive plan, or are
Yes.
you talking about the game plan?
Game plan.
Can you repeat the question?
Go ahead.
Is the stated policy of the Denver Department of Parks and Recreation stated in the Denver Blueprint?
There are policies stated within the game plan, yes.
And do you try to follow those policies?
Yes.
Do you believe that Denver Parks and Recreation should post appropriate signs in parks?
Yes.
Do you believe that the Department of Parks and Recreation should not mislead citizens about the legal status of parks?
I don't feel like it's our responsibility to advise citizens on the legal status. I think there's a due diligence required from the property owner, and I think beyond that, it's not our responsibility nor my responsibility to give legal advice.
Do you believe that citizens of Denver should be able to trust the information that's published by your department?
Yes.
And would that include citizens being able to trust the official publications of your department that show city parks?
As to their status or to whether they're a park? Can you repeat the question? Should citizens be able to trust the official map that the city puts out in terms of what is a park?
Yes.
Yes.
Should citizens be able to trust the signage in parks?
I think signage is for a number of purposes and doesn't convey legal status.
What effect does it have on a natural area when you build a government building in the middle of it?
This parcel is no longer a natural area, so can you further define your question?
Well, how does it affect wildlife and plant life when you tear it up and build a government building in its place?
If you want me to refer to this parcel specifically, there was extremely limited amount of plant life on the parcel itself. Yeah, there were prairie dogs on the site, and they were removed prior to or during the time of acquisition by DPS.
Well, in general, how does it affect a natural area when you put buildings in the middle of it?
I think in this case there are ways that we determined that we could provide buffers between the building itself, the building itself, the natural environment of the school, and the designated natural area and park adjacent to that. So the buffers itself would contain the most quality species of natural habitat, and those that are currently in natural area status and park status would not be affected.
So it would have no effect on wildlife to take 11 acres out of a natural area?
I guess I don't know how to answer that question. It removes an area that they're able to access, yes.
And wasn't the purpose of natural areas to provide a habitat for wildlife?
Yes, but it didn't remove totally their habitat because there's still 67 or 76 acres of natural habitat, including the Cherry Creek corridor that habitat can access.
So your position is, as long as the animals have some place to live, it's okay to build in a natural area?
I didn't say that.
No, I know you didn't, but is that your position?
I wouldn't say that's my position. I answered the question saying that there's still additional land here that would not have extremely compromised the condition of the habitat or the native plant species in this area.
The city has designated you to talk about the management of Hampden Heights North Park, or Parcel 31, from 1936 until 2013. What can you tell us about that?
From November 2011, when I started, until the transaction happened and it was no longer within our control, I would say there was extremely limited management, or maintenance of that property due to the condition of the property itself.
Did you talk to anybody in the Parks Department to see if they thought that this was a designated park?
Greg Meisky.
Anybody else?
Not that I can recall. He's typically the person I would go to for that information because he manages the list that we have that's designated or non-designated parkland.
And you say there's a list of all of the designated parks?
Yes.
You have a copy of that list?
Yes.
When was the first time that you visited Hampden Heights North Park?
Probably, if you're referring to the Parcel 31, probably 2005, 2006.
Why did you go there?
I ride my bike through there.
How many times have you visited Hampden Heights North Park?
30.
How many of those times were on your bike?
Probably 20.
Is it a nice place to ride?
I usually ride through there to Cherry Creek Reservoir.
Right. See any wildlife while you're riding?
Not there.
Never have?
Not there that I can recall.
See any people on horseback while you were riding?
Never.
See any children playing in the park?
Not in that area. My sister lives in that area, and I would see them in the improved part of Hampton, of Hensel Park, but not in that area.
How are parks named?
There's an official process that's identified through the naming policy, which starts with either a individual or a neighborhood association or a council member trying to identify, a park that doesn't have a name, coming to the city, getting advisement about what they have to do, which starts with collecting signatures of adjacent neighbors. So they go through that process. They collect the required signatures. There's a public hearing that's required, posting on a public hearing that's required at the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. The Parks and Rec Advisory Board makes a recommendation to the manager. The manager makes a recommendation to City Council, and ultimately parks are named through the ordinance process at City Council.
How did the name Hampton Heights North Park get on the city's official map?
I have no idea.
Now that bike trail that you ride on, who paid for that?
In general, or
Yes.
the one through Hampton Heights?
Who went through Hampton Heights North Park?
I don't know.
All right. The city designated you to talk about the funding of the bridges and bike trails that go through that property. Do you have no information about that?
I don't.
I'm going to show you exhibit number 33. Can you please tell us what exhibit 33 is?
It's a bike trail.
Where?
I'm not quite sure.
You don't recall ever having seen it before?
I just don't know where it is in reference to, there's a lot of bike trails that could potentially look like this.
Did you say your sister lives in Hampton Heights East?
Yes.
And you ride your bike at your sister's house frequently?
No, I ride my bike on the trail.
Let me show you exhibit number 34. Is exhibit 34 a photograph of a standard Denver Department of Parks and Recreation park rules sign?
To be honest, there's a number of iterations of signs that we have in our park. This is one of the signs. We don't actually have a standard sign until most recently when we're trying to go to a standard and replacing all the signs so that they are consistent.
Is this a Denver Parks Department sign that we see here?
I would assume.
Okay. Are these standard park rules?
Yes.
And does the Parks Department post those rules at the entrances to parks?
Objection. At this point, an object is irrelevant. Any of these photos that haven't been authenticated as being in the property that was conveyed by the city to DPS. But go ahead and answer.
Can you repeat the question?
And does the Parks Department post those rules at the entrances to parks?
They're posted all over the place. Honestly, some are at the entrance, some are in the interior of the park. So there's no standard in terms of where they're actually posted.
Okay, well, let me represent to you that this sign, Exhibit 34, is posted at the entrance to Hampton Heights North Park. Would you, do you disagree with that?
There's many entrances to the park. I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
All right, if you look at Exhibit 33, that park sign is mounted on the fence right next to the bike trail on the right as you're riding into the park.
Okay.
All right?
I'm gonna-
And just beyond that fence is,
Objection. The witness has already indicated she doesn't know where 33 is. This is not an opportunity for counsel to testify. So we're objecting in terms of being argumentative.
okay, I'm just trying to get the witness oriented here. Let me represent to you that you're looking east in Exhibit 33 toward Hampton Heights North Park, which you call Parcel 31. All right? And that's where the sign is. Now, do you put park signs on areas that aren't under parks management?
No, typically not.
All right. And it's important for the police to know which land areas are Denver parks. True?
Yes, generally.
Because the police enforce the rules in parks. True?
They have the ability to, but they're not the only ones. We have park rangers who enforce the rules
Right.
as well.
But if a land area is not a park, then there's no violation of a park rule. True?
I don't think there's any legal requirement to have a sign posted to allow the police to enforce Chapter 39 on the park.
Sure. I'm making a different point. It's legal to consume alcohol on private property. True?
True.
So the police would have no business arresting somebody for drinking on private property. True?
Unless they were intoxicated.
Right. Unless there was a disturbance of some kind.
Yeah.
True? All right. But if a person was drinking alcoholic beverages in a park, then the police could enforce Chapter 39 of the revised municipal code. True?
Yes, if it were in an area that weren't permitted for alcohol consumption.
Right. So that's why it's important that people know what is a park and what's not a park, because they have to know which rules to follow. True?
I think there's that's probably a safe assumption.
Let me show you exhibit number 35. Can you tell us what this is, please?
Looks like a bridge across Cherry Creek.
And do you know where that bridge is?
Probably a little bit beyond Exhibit 33. I don't know. I don't know exactly, though.
Let's say again, a standing objection is to any photograph of facilities and property that aren't the subject of this litigation for relevance.
Let me show you exhibit number 36. Can you identify that, please?
Yes.
What is exhibit 36?
What is it?
Yeah.
It's a bike trail and a sign that's directional to Cherry Creek South and Hamden Heights Park.
And are these Parks Department signs that are posted in here?
You know, actually, it doesn't have a DPR logo in it. It may have been something, I don't know.
And the purpose of the signs is to inform members of the public where the bike trails go?
In this case, yes.
Let me show you exhibit 37 and ask if you can identify that.
I think I have an understanding of where it is, but I can't say 100%.
Do you see parcel 31 in the background behind the sign?
I don't see anything identified as parcel 31. But that looks similar to what that parcel has looked like at times.
Now, did you notice when you were riding your bike up to the Cherry Creek Dam, as you rode past this sign that warns bike riders of danger during flash floods?
I can't say that I have a recollection of that sign.
Do you know who put that sign here?
No.
It's on Parks property, but you don't know who put it there?
No, I don't have a direct knowledge of who put the sign there.
Was it somebody in the Parks Department?
I just said I don't have direct knowledge of who put the sign there.
Is anybody outside of the Parks Department authorized to put signs on property that is managed by the Parks Department?
Sometimes there's joint agreements between, especially along, Cherry Creek or, South Platte River, because urban flood and drainage sometimes has some management authority. So occasionally they erect signs relating to their activities or their responsibilities within there. So I would say anyone within that kind of scope could erect a sign.
I'm showing you Exhibit 38. Can you tell us what that is?
It looks like, I can't say 100%, it looks like it's probably Cherry Creek.
Is that the bridge that goes from Parcel, or goes over Cherry Creek in the middle of Parcel 31?
Part of it is probably in the middle of Parcel 31, I would say. I don't have a map of reference. It could be part of it is in Hensel Park. The one side I would assume is in Hensel Park.
Which side?
The north side.
That park runs east-west, or that bridge goes east-west.
On the west side.
Actually, it's in Parcel 31.
Okay. Why did you ask me if you already knew it?
I was trying to find out what you know.
Well,
I would object to the kind of the deterioration of this. Let's have question and answers, please.
Okay. She asked me a question, and I answered it. Now, Ms. Dannemiller, I want to ask you about this de-designation letter that you wrote, which is exhibit number 41. Are the first two pages of the first 4 pages of Exhibit 41, the letter that you wrote de-designating the land that was traded to DPS?
yes.
I'd like to direct your attention to footnote number 1 on page 1.
Mm-hmm.
So, could you read out loud the first sentence, please?
Research by the Denver City Attorney's Office discovered that this parcel was originally acquired in 1936 for an unspecified city purpose, later to serve as part of an extensive program that the Denver Department of Public Works undertook back in the 1930s to gain ownership of the Cherry Creek corridor, so it could better deal with drainage control and flooding prevention along Cherry Creek.
Who was the, first of all, who authored this letter? Who actually composed the words?
I did.
You didn't get any help from anyone?
No.
Did the city attorney's office review it before you sent it?
Objection to the extent that he's seeking communications from the city attorney's office. You don't need to answer those questions.
I'm not asking her about anything anyone said to one another. I'm just asking her if the city attorney reviewed it before she sent it.
You can answer that question.
You know, I can't recall for sure whether the city attorney's office did review this or not. It wasn't a legal document. It was an opinion that I was authorized to offer.
All right, so which city attorney did the research that's referred to in this footnote number 1?
That was referencing prior communications that I had with Patrick Wheeler.
Could you read aloud the second sentence, please, of footnote 1?
It was not acquired for park or even trail purposes since this area was located in Arapahoe County in 1936.
Who gave you that information?
Patrick Wheeler gave me that after he looked at the deed.
Well, did he do any investigation other than looking at the deed, if you know?
Objection calls for speculation.
If you know?
I don't know.
So why was it important for you to know whether or not this was a park?
I don't necessarily think that that was the, you know, a criteria for making the recommendation. It was an additional information to the letter that was provided.
All right, could you read the third sentence out loud, please, of footnote 1?
Even up to 1956, there was no reason to believe that Denver was using this parcel for park purposes, or it would have been designated as park property in the mass designation process that occurred for all parcels in park use in 1956.
And who provided that information to you?
I would believe, I don't know that it was specific information that was provided to me. It was as a result of discussion about this parcel not being in ownership of the city prior to 1956.
Well, the city
Or,
owned it.
I'm sorry, and not in ownership of the Parks Department at that time prior to 1956, or that's why that was added in there.
I see. So just so the record's clear, your testimony is that as far as you knew at the time when you wrote this, Parcel 31 was not in the ownership of the Parks Department in 1956.
Correct.
Did you ever read the ordinance that granted an easement across part of Parcel 31 to CDOT in 1955?
I think I may have read the deed, not the ordinance.
Well, isn't it true that Parcel 31 was owned and managed by the manager of improvements and parks up to December 31st, 1955?
No, I don't have direct knowledge of that.
But you say you read the deed, the 1955 deed to CDOT?
Yes.
Wasn't it signed by the manager of improvements and parks?
I don't recall who it was signed by.
Would that be important to you to know whether or not it was owned by the manager of improvements and parks prior to December 31, 1955?
If it was owned by the manager of, or if it was owned by the Department of Parks and Recreation prior to 1955, it would have been designated as a park, and it wasn't designated as a park prior to 1955.
How do you know that?
Because I was relying on the data that the deed and the city attorney's office had provided to me.
All right, so what information did the city attorney's office provide to you to lead you to this conclusion?
Objection. You do not have to answer that question in terms of any advice and information given to you by the city attorney's office.
Well, I think this is going to be important because she relied on it for research, not legal advice. So we're not talking about representation here. We're talking about research of a fact. And she relied on the city attorney's office. This is not a privileged communication.
We're going to have to disagree on that. Under the rule, I'm entitled to object and have her not respond to any advice she was given from the Denver City Attorney's Office.
I'm not asking her about advice. I'm asking her about the research she was provided.
Distinction without a difference. My objection stands.
Are you instructing your witness not to answer?
Yes.
Okay, so what documents did you have in your possession that informed you whether or not Parcel 31 was a designated park?
I had the list of designated parks that I had been given from the department when I joined. I had a copy of the deed. I had...
You mean the 1936 deed to Parcel 31?
That's the deed that we had originally looked at.
Any other documents besides park lists and the original deed?
Not that I can recall. Advice of the attorney, I would say.
All right, now, what's your understanding of what you refer to as a mass designation process?
That all the parcels that were owned by the Department of Parks and Recreation were at the time of the original charter language going in. That was how I generically was referring to mass designation, because there were a number of parcels. To my knowledge, there weren't any individual designation ordinances the way that the parks are designated now, so that's why I described it as a mass designation.
And when you say mass designation, you mean when the charter was amended on May 17th of 1955, which became effective January 1 of 56, that designated all parks that were owned by the city at that time as parks.
Not owned by the city, but owned by the Department of Parks and Recreation and managed.
And are you aware that at the time the Department of Parks and Recreation was named the Department of Improvements and Parks?
Yeah, it was combined with Public Works.
Right. So it would be your understanding that parks managed by the Department of Improvements and Parks were designated as parks by the Charter Amendment in 1955?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes.
So it would be your understanding that parks managed by the Department of Improvement and Parks were designated as parks by the Charter Amendment in 1955.
I'm going to object again that it calls for a legal conclusion, indeed on the ultimate issue in the case. Go ahead.
I think that the process that took place with the Charter Amendment thus designated parks that were owned, managed by the city's Public Improvements Department at the time.
Let me show you exhibit number 21. That's an affidavit by Mr. Neil Sperendale. Do you know Mr. Sperendale?
No.
Could you look at paragraph number 5, please, and read it out loud?
It is my interpretation and understanding of the Denver Charter that parks existing prior to 1955 are designated parks and that there was no requirement that they be designated by ordinance. The department has consistently enforced this interpretation, which is in accord with the 1955 and 1983 Charter amendments to Section A 4.5.
Okay. Do you agree with the statements that Mr. Sperendale made under oath in paragraph number 5?
Do I agree with his interpretation?
Do you agree with the statement? Let's just take it, it's 2 sentences. Do you agree with the first sentence?
That parks that were managed and operated as parks prior to 1955 were not designated by ordinance, but as a result of the charter, that they became parks, yes.
All right, so you agree with the first sentence of paragraph 5. True?
Yes.
Do you agree with the second sentence of paragraph 5?
I'm not sure how the department has enforced the interpretation except for under my management.
Right. Under your management, has the department consistently enforced this interpretation as explained in the first sentence of paragraph 5?
We have a designation process that we adhere to. There's a process that it has to happen by ordinance now. And that land that was in ownership and management of the Department of Parks and Recreation prior, or public improvement prior to 1955, were designated parks.
So you agree with the second sentence of paragraph 5?
I just said I don't know how it was interpreted prior to my management. So I can't agree because I don't know how it was interpreted consistently prior to 2012.
So you don't know if the Parks Department has consistently enforced the interpretation of paragraph 5 or not?
No.
Now then, you mentioned that you looked at parks lists. Let me show you the February 1995 official city park list and map.
I'm sorry, what year?
This is February 1995, and Mr. Knightsky identified that for us this morning.
Okay.
Okay. Is this one of the documents you looked at to determine if Parcel 31 was a Denver park?
No.
Let me show you the more recent list of Denver parks and the map of those parks. Is this one of the documents that you looked at?
To make a determination? No, a legal I didn't use this to make my determination.
Well, no, you said you did some research to determine if Hampton Heights North Park was really a park, right?
It was a designated park. That's
Right.
that was the ultimate question that I knew everybody, that City Council would have to answer, whether it was a designated park or not whether it was managed. Okay, sorry.
You're
I
okay
can hear
to-
you when you hear it.
Okay, no, I know, I was just moving it. I did not use this map to make a determination whether it was a designated park or not, because this is not an indication of whether it's a designated park or not. This is an indication of what areas are managed by the city. There are a number of parcels on this map that aren't even owned by the city, so they couldn't even ever be designated park, but they're called parks for management purposes.
Is Hampton Heights North on this list of parks that's in front of you?
No.
Okay, could you look to your left at the little yellow sticky?
Okay.
Is Hampton Heights North?
It's on here, yes.
Yes, it is on the list, isn't it?
Yes, but
And it's also shown in green on the map, true.
it says Hampton Heights. It doesn't say Hampton Heights North
All right.
on this map.
There are two parks in the area. One is Hampton Heights Park, which is where the swimming pool and tennis court is, and the other is Hampton Heights North Park, which is adjacent to Hensel. You agree with that?
I would say that's the generic name that area is known by, yes.
All right. Now, can you point to parcel 31 on this map?
Basically right around in this area.
Right. And is it shown in green?
I would say yes.
Okay. And does green indicate a park?
It in parks management, yes.
Well, no. It says parks, doesn't it, on the legend, right above where
I
you're
answered
looking?
your question. It's in parks management, so yes, it's a park. I don't think there was any question whether it was a park or not. I think whether it's a designated park or not has been the ultimate question.
So according to this map, it's a park, true?
Yes.
Doesn't say this park is not a designated park, it just says it's a park, true?
That's true.
All right. And the name Hampton Heights North appears over on the left lower corner of the list of parks there, doesn't it?
Yep, it says Hampton Heights North, and it says Hampton Heights Park. It also has a number of parks on here that we don't own.
The city owns Hampton Heights North, doesn't it?
A portion of it now.
Yes, we know you traded part of the park away. My question is, at the time this map was published, the city owned Hampton Heights North Park, true?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we're done with that. Now, let's go through Exhibit 32. As you mentioned, you looked at a list of parks. There we go. Thank you. So, have you seen this document before today?
No.
All right. So let me just ask you if you would go through the document, Exhibit 32, starting with Appendix 1. Is this one of the park lists that you looked at to determine if Hampton Heights North Park was a city park?
No.
And Appendix 2, did you look at Appendix 2 to help you determine if Hampton Heights North Park was a park?
No, I can probably save you some time and tell you that we have an internal list. That's the list I looked at, and I made a determination based on conversations that I've had with our city attorney about whether it was a designated park or a non-designated park
Where is your internal list?
in my office.
Okay. Who else has a copy?
A number of staff people.
Okay. Is Mr. Knightsky one of those people?
Yes.
Okay, so you didn't look at you didn't look at Appendix 2, which is the list published by the Parks Department in 1979. Is
No.
that true?
Yes, that's true. I did not look at it.
Okay, you didn't look at Appendix 3, the Parks list from 1991.
No, I did not.
You didn't look at Appendix 4, the Parks list from 1998.
No, I did not.
You didn't look at Appendix 5, the parks list from, another parks list from 98? Is that right?
I know I'm looking at this one because it looks somewhat similar, but I can't tell. This potentially was the one that I may have looked at because the current document that I use looks similar to this. It's in a spreadsheet, and it says whether the year that it was designated or not designated. So this one looks probably closest to the one that I have.
All right, and you're saying Appendix 5?
Yeah.
All right, now, it says year acquired in 1981, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so your understanding when you looked at the list was this property was acquired in 1981?
No, I'm saying this looks like a similar list. I can't verify that the list that I looked at said 1991 on it. I verified that this says 1991.
And that's a mistake, isn't it, in the list?
To my knowledge, the parcel was acquired by the Parks and Recreation Department in '76 or something like that.
And you're referring to Parcel 31?
Yes.
Okay, could you look at Appendix 6, please?
Okay.
All right, is Appendix 6 one of the parks lists that you looked at in determining whether or not Hampton Heights North Park was a designated park?
No.
Exhibit number 7, I'm sorry, Appendix number 7, is this one of the lists that you looked at in determining whether Hampton Heights North Park was a designated park?
No.
How about Appendix 8? Was that one of the documents you consulted?
No. It's prior to me coming on. It's like it's 05.
Appendix number 9, did you ever look at this document to help you determine whether Hampton Heights North Park was a designated park?
No.
Appendix 10, did you look at that to help you determine if Hampton Heights North Park was a designated park?
No.
Appendix 11, did you look at that to help you determine if Hampton Heights North Park was a designated park?
I recall looking at a map like this, but it wasn't used because this doesn't delineate between designated or non-designated parks.
So how does a member of the public determine whether or not a park on your lists and your maps is really a designated park that can't be sold? Is there some way that Joe Citizen can find that out?
I think that if you were looking for a true legal determination, that you would make a request to the legal department of the city to provide documentation whether it was designated or not. Beyond that, I think there is not anything that I think really indicates whether it's designated or non-designated. I think had we been providing maps that said this is designated and it wasn't designated, that's one thing, but in general, the maps are provided for the purpose of knowing where the parcels are in terms of locating accessible space, not to provide legal documents to say whether this is a designated or non-designated park.
Well, do you believe that the public has an interest in knowing whether or not a park is designated and whether it can be sold without a vote of the people?
Do I believe the public has an interest in that?
Yes.
I would say now there's more of an interest, but there had never been an activity prior to this that had, thank you so much, had been given so much interest.
Well, this was the first time in the history of the Denver Parks Department that it had ever de-designated a natural area, true?
That's not a legal status of whether it's a designated park or non-designated park. I think we're kind of confusing topics.
Right. This was the first time that you know of that the city had traded parkland to Denver Public Schools, true?
Yes.
And that's why the public got so excited about it. It never happened before, true?
There was I think a general, yes, concern about the trading of the park. It's
Right.
not the first time that undesignated parkland has ever been traded or purchased.
And what you're telling us is that citizens cannot believe the maps and the lists that your department publishes to the public, because these don't tell us whether parks are designated or not designated.
I
True?
didn't say that.
Well, how could a citizen trust these lists if they don't show whether the park is really legally protected?
There's nothing on there that says that this is a legal document that shows whether the parks are protected or not. They're serving different purposes to provide, I explained what the purpose of the map was. It wasn't to convey legal status on the park, it was to convey where the parks were located for accessibility purposes.
Now, did you consult Charter Section 2.4.5?
Yes,
And did you do that before you wrote your de-designation letter?
yes.
And what's your understanding of 2.4.5?
That land that was in ownership by the Parks and Recreation Department or some form of that prior to 1955, or land that is designated subsequent by an ordinance as a park cannot be sold without a vote of the people.
Did you ever watch the city council vote at which 2.4.5 was adopted?
No.
Let me show it to you. Play that.
Is this an exhibit?
Yes, it's 23. 23-1. We got sound?
Yes, and I apologize, I actually need to turn up the sound on my computer. So, let's take just a minute.
Madam President, Council Bill 677 refers a charter amendment to the voters at the November 5th election. The amendment confirms that parks used as parks prior to 1955 are designated parks. The amendment clears up confusion that results from a Grand County court interpretation of current charter language on parks. It confirms that parks designated as parks after 1955 are still designated as parks. It provides for further designation of parks in the future. If this amendment is passed, then once a park is designated, it cannot be sold without a vote of the electors.
Thank you, John. The public hearing is open. We have no one signed up for the public hearing. At this point in time, are there questions of staff about this amendment? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Are there comments from members of council? Seeing none, a roll call on Council Bill 677.
Hartsfield.
Aye.
Casey.
Aye.
Davis. Lobeck.
Aye.
Foster.
Aye.
Gallagher.
Aye.
Haynes.
Aye.
Himmelman.
Aye.
Martinez. Ortega. Thomas. Madam President,
Aye.
12 ayes.
12 ayes. Council Bill 677 is adopted. Councilman Himmelman.
Is today the first time that you've seen that council proceeding?
Yes.
Let me show you exhibit number 23. That video is 23-1. This is 23 that I'm showing you. And just replay the video, and then I want to ask you if exhibit 23 is an accurate transcript of that meeting.
Madam President, Council Bill 677 refers a charter amendment to the voters at the November 5th election. The amendment confirms that parks used as parks prior to 1955 are designated parks. The amendment clears up confusion that results from a Grand County court interpretation of current charter language on parks. It confirms that parks designated as parks after 1955 are still designated as parks. It provides further designation of it provides for further designation of parks in the future. If this amendment is passed, then once a park is designated, it cannot be sold without a vote of the electors.
Thank you, John. Public hearing is open. We have no one signed up for the public hearing. At this point in time, are there questions of staff about this amendment? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. Are there comments from members of council? Seeing none, a roll call on Council Bill 677.
Hartsfield.
Aye.
Casey. Aye. Davis. Lobeck.
Aye.
Foster. Gallagher.
Aye.
Kane.
Aye.
Himmelman.
Aye.
Martinez. Ortega. Aye. Thomas. Madam President,
Aye.
12 ayes.
So ayes, Council Bill 677 is adopted. Councilman Himmelman.
Do you agree that Deposition Exhibit 23 is an accurate transcript of the council vote that we just observed on the video?
Yes.
Now then, let me show you Exhibit number 24. This is a copy of the ordinance that we just saw pass there. It's ordinance number, or Council Bill 677, which became Ordinance 704, series of 1996. Take a few moments to go through this if you haven't seen it before.
Okay.
Does this Exhibit 24, is this a copy of the ordinance that council passed in Exhibit 23?
I don't know that as direct knowledge.
Well, is this Council Bill 677 in Exhibit 24?
That's what it seems to be, a copy of Council Bill 677.
Right. And is Council Bill 677 the bill that passed in Exhibit 23?
It appears to be.
All right. So this is the bill that passed in Exhibit 23, right? 24 is the bill that council passed in Exhibit 23.
Question's been asked and answered. Objection.
All right. You can answer it again. I'm just trying to have a clear record here.
Yes, again.
All right. Thanks. Now then, if you would look at paragraph A4.5, please, in Council Bill 677. Is that the current language of Charter Section 2.4.5?
This looks like it's in a Section 1, so it's actually Section 1A 4.5. So I would prefer to see a copy of 2.4.5 to compare.
Oh, glad to help you out there. Let me show you Exhibit number 40. And you can compare that to number 24. And tell us word for word if Council Bill 677 has the same language in it as Charter Section 2.4.5.
Appears to.
All right. Now then, you heard the discussion prior to council voting on the bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you heard the statement, the amendment confirms that parks used as parks prior to 1955 are designated parks. You heard that, right?
I heard that.
Yes. And do you believe that is a fair interpretation of Council Bill 677 and Charter Section 2.4.5?
No.
Why not?
Because it says that no park or portion of any park belonging to the city. So there's a lot of times that parks or land can be used. That's not the determination whether it belonged to the city in 1955 or not. It wasn't whether it was used, which is what John said.
So John was wrong?
I'm assuming yes.
Okay.
It was
And-
his interpretation of what the bill was supposed to be. He's not an attorney, nor was he the staff person from Parks and Recreation. He was merely the executive director of city council staff at the time, trying to explain to city council, provide this staff report to city council, because no one else was there.
All right, so he was reading from a script. Do you know who wrote that script for him?
Probably he did.
He had the job you had,
Yep.
right? Do you know John Bennett?
Yes.
Where does he live?
I think he lived, I don't know where he lives specifically now. I know that at one time, the last I knew, he lived in Denver.
Okay, when was the last time you knew that he lived in Denver?
Probably 2006.
How old a gentleman is he now, if you know?
I don't know.
When was the last time you saw him?
At collective bargaining negotiations with the police department,
When was that?
2006.
And where did he live at the time?
I think he lived in Denver. I can't say that for sure.
What part of Denver?
I have no idea.
Do you know his middle name?
I'm going to finally object to this whole line of questioning, but answer the question
No.
for relevance, of course.
I do not know his middle name.
So, did you ever interview anybody on the city council that voted for Council Bill 677 to see what they thought they were voting for?
No.
You know Dennis Gallagher, right?
Yes.
He's the city auditor for Denver now.
Yes.
You never talked to him about this?
No.
Do you not want to know what council intended when they enacted Council Bill 677?
No, I believe I know.
I see. You know without talking to anyone what they intended?
Well, I guess my opinion is that it was a council bill that they were allowed to make a determination on the validity of it or not. That was never my role to determine the purpose of 2.4.5. It was a law that was standing at the time in charter that I was following.
Now, if Hampton Heights North Park was a designated park, then the city had no power to transfer it without a vote of the people. Is that a true statement?
I would say that's probably a legal determination on the part of the city attorneys that I would not be charged with making.
Well, the charter prohibits the transfer of any parkland without a vote of the people. True?
That's what the charter says, yes.
Right. So if Hampton Heights North Park was a park at the time that it was conveyed, then that transfer violated Charter Section 2.4.5. True?
Objection calls for another conclusion as to the law. But answer if you...
I just answered the question. It's not my legal, it's not my role to interpret whether the transaction was legal or not. That's left up to the city attorney's office.
So you cannot answer that question. Is that right?
You can ask me again. I can respond again saying that that's not my role to determine whether it was a legal decision or not, or whether it was legally done. I believe it was legally done because the park was not designated at the time.
All right. My question is a hypothetical question. If it was a park, the city had no power to transfer it unless the people voted. Is that a true statement?
If it were-
Same objection, that'll be a continuing objection every time he rephrases question asking for you to give a conclusion as to what the charter means legally.
If it were a designated park, you didn't ask if it were a designated park.
All right, if it were a designated park, the city could not transfer it without a vote of the people. True?
I think that's a legal determination. I would give you that that's what the charter sets out.
What will happen if the court determines that Hampton Heights North Park is a park
Not
and
up
that
to
it
me.
should not have been transferred?
Not up to me to make that decision. I don't know.
Would you be in favor of allowing the people to vote on the issue?
Objection as to relevance. Go ahead.
I'll answer the same way I answered earlier in the deposition, was that I'm in support of what the people have voted on, the charter language, implementing what the charter language says. So I would be in favor of people voting to transfer land that has been designated as an official park.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ms. Dannemiller, give me a second to see if I have anything here to follow up with you on. I think you covered this in your testimony, but just to be clear again, you were shown a series of parks maps and were asked questions about parks maps and park signs and so on and so forth. Was it your testimony that parcels and real estate may show up on parks maps or even have a park sign but not be a designated park within the meaning of 2.4.5? Is that accurate?
On those maps, yes.
Yeah, but let me ask about signs in particular. First of all, just specific to the property that was transferred to DPS for the school, do you recall ever seeing a Denver official Parks and Recreation sign on that property identifying it as Hampton Heights North Park?
No.
But elsewhere in the system of real estate that you manage, are there examples of undesignated parks that have a park sign?
Yes.
Okay, give an example
We just did Ruby Hill.
as an example.
Yes.
And are you mentioning Ruby Hill in the context of you going through a lot of parks designations right now, right?
Yeah, we're in the process of looking at all the land that has not been designated, that is in our ownership, and designating that parcel, or designating that as a park through the official designation process. There's a number of parks that we have to go. We're doing a certain number of rounds that probably have an average of 5 to 7 parcels within them that are known as parks but not designated as parks officially.
And on that point, just one other kind of quick overview question for the record. This big parks designation process you're doing it kind of addresses a situation you inherited when you became parks manager, right?
Yes.
Do you have any sense for why that never happened before and is happening in the current administration in terms of the overall policy reflected in that?
I think the overall policy reflected from our department is that it's an effort that we're carrying out based on knowledge that, yes, the parks that we have that are non-designated should be protected. The prior administrations, I know, started to go through the process. It's a long, laborious process. It takes time and money. I think there was just not necessarily the will on the prior administration to go through that process.
Mm-hmm. And then just a couple of quick detail questions. There's a lot about the bike path, and you're sharing all of our passion for biking. Is the bike path depicted in the photos you saw in the property that got transferred to DPS?
No.
Is it adjacent?
I think it's leading up to. I would guess, yes, it's probably adjacent.
Okay. And you testified as to a pretty elaborate formal naming process for city parks in
Yes.
response to Mr. Case's questions. Does that culminate in an ordinance actually naming a park nowadays?
Yes.
And to the best of your knowledge, has that process ever been applied to the tract of land, the school site that was conveyed to DPS, or even the surroundings areas? Are you aware of any ordinance or formal naming process that resulted in calling any of this territory Hampton Heights North Park?
No.
Let's see, maybe one more thing. The one final topic, just to flesh out a little bit more. At the same time as council approved the conveyance of the acreage to DPS, some adjacent property was designated as parkland at that time. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what happened to that park? Was it added, or that property, was it added to another park?
It was added to Hensel Park.
Okay, and Hensel Park lies generally what direction?
I guess I would say to the west. From my knowledge, I would say to the northwest if you're
Yeah.
looking at the map. And this parcel 31 is a little bit further south, but north and west, and then continuing on the other side of the trail.
And just quickly, on Hensel, in the early days of this whole controversy, the Hensel was the name that was used to describe the controversy.
The entire parcel, yes.
And didn't in the early days of the controversy people call it the Hensel Park land swap?
I still do.
And some people still do. Has the DPS property ever been formally a part of Hensel Park?
No.
But the natural area, yes, right?
Yes.
But not Hensel Park as the park.
No.
And in regard to Hensel, the property lying north and west, do you recall around what time period that was acquired? Or who it was acquired from?
So my understanding is that the original parcel was acquired for the purposes of flood control by Denver Water, and then Denver Water, as it separated from the city, thus the ownership came to the city. I think the individual property was owned by an individual. I don't remember his name, but it was acquired from
an
individual.
Do you recall when the city of Denver acquired it from Denver Water and designated it as parkland?
No,
How far back in the record that
it
occurred?
wasn't designated. Hensel Park?
Yes, Hensel Park is
I'm
what we're
sorry, I
talking about
don't
now.
remember that off the top of my head. I want to say 75 is what comes to mind, because I know that that area was not even in Denver. It was in Arapahoe County up until I think 75.
Okay, and one of the reasons I'm asking that question is in response to one of Mr. Case's questions. Hensel Park, as distinct from Parcel 31, you testified in response to his question, you thought Parcel 31, which lies to the south of Hensel,
Yeah.
As having been acquired in the mid-70s also.
Yes.
That's your recollection and understanding?
I don't know exactly when Hensel was acquired, but my recollection was in reference to the acquisition of the Parcel 31. I believe that they were done at the same time, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's even more clear why this parcel was not designated, and Hensel was designated at the time. If there was an intention to designate what we're referring to as Chapter 31, it could have been done at the same time that Hensel was...
Parcel 31?
Parcel 31, it could have been done at the same time that Hensel Park was designated, but there was obviously an overt reason to not do that.
But you don't have all of that entirely fixed in your brain at this point in terms of what happened when?
I don't know the date reference.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
So as I understand what you just said, there must have been a reason why council did not designate Parcel 31 as a park when it designated Hensel Park as a park. Do I understand that correctly?
I said it must have been. That's my assumption, that they had the opportunity at the time to do that, so there was probably some reason that it wasn't done in total, that there was a line delineated between Hensel and the Parcel 31.
Now, if a park is already designated a park, there's no need to do it again with an ordinance, is there?
No?
Let me show you Exhibit 42. Is this what you refer to as the Denver game plan? It's selected pages, I acknowledge, not
No,
all the pages.
This is the city's overall comprehensive plan. The department itself has a separate document that's called the game plan. That's not this document.
I see. All right, well, have you read the Denver comprehensive plan?
I think portions of it when I first started with the city in 2005.
Right. Okay, let me ask you if you agree with this statement. It's on the third page in, which has a page number 5. Guiding principles. Could you read that paragraph out loud, please?
In the box or below
Yes,
that?
in the box.
When we think about our personal obligation to the survival of the species, we think about the instruction given to us by our chiefs, make every decision on behalf of the 7th generation to come, to think not of ourselves nor even of our own generation, but on behalf of those faces looking up from earth. Each generation is waiting its turn.
Do you agree with that philosophy here, by?
Objection is to relevance. Answer the question.
I don't see how that's relevant to this discussion.
Now, could you look at the last page of Exhibit 42? Do you see that Parcel 31 is included on the Parks map here, which is part of the comprehensive plan?
I'm assuming that's there. No, I can't. Yes.
So it's your understanding that Parcel 31 was included in the long-term comprehensive plan for Denver Parks, true?
This is not the long-term comprehensive plan for Denver Parks. This is the long-term comprehensive plan for the city that was adopted by the Community Planning and Development Department, not the City and County of Denver Parks and Recreation Department. So no, I would disagree with that.
Right, so do you have a historical document that shows what the comprehensive plan is for the Parks Department that is different than Exhibit 42?
Yes.
May I ask why that has not been produced?
I don't know that you asked us for the game plan, but if you did, and we didn't, I'll get it to you.
Thank you.
It's a document that's readily available on the website.
All right, well, we'll get it off the website then. Now then, is it, from what you testified to today, it's my understanding that you have a list in your office that's on a spreadsheet of parkland in Denver. Some of parks are designated parks, according to your records, and some are not. Is that a true statement?
Yes.
Who else has that list?
I can't say in total. I know that I received the list from Greg Knightsky.
All right. So he has a copy as far as you know?
Yes.
And you have a copy?
Yes.
Anybody else that you know of that has a copy?
I just answered that question. I can't testify to any direct knowledge of anyone else having that list.
Well, how about Scott Gilmore? Does he have a copy?
He may be operating from a different document. I can't testify 100% for sure if that's what you're looking for.
All right. So, and the list that you have, you consider the definitive list of what is a park that has been designated by law. Is that right?
I don't think it confers any legal status. It's what I use when someone asks me, is this park designated or not?
All right. And as far as you know, there are only 2 people in Denver who have access to that list.
I didn't say who have access. You asked me who has the list.
All right.
I didn't
Who
say
have
who
a
has
copy of it.
access. Yeah, I told you who I know who has a copy.
Right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Can I ask one clarification based on that? Ms. Dannemiller, what you're testifying to now, is that list in any way related to the whole designation process you're going through right now?
Yes.
Because I have seen lists of public record as part of that discussion that have extensive lists of properties in terms of things that are identified as designated, undesignated, subject to designation, can't be designated, and so forth. Are you referring to those lists, or is it something else?
That's the document that we use that I obtained from Greg Knightsky that I use in reference. That was a question about whether I know who has a copy of the list. We do use that list, I know, to identify what the, yes, what the parks that are designated or not in the ongoing designation process that we're going through to designate all available parcels.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
The time is 1:41, is conclusion of deposition.